Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lead Podcast, where our intention is to develop the next generation of future hospitality industry leaders. I'm so excited about this topic because it was so impactful to my leadership journey. What we're discussing today is owning the numbers, how financial mastery sets great hospitality leaders apart from the rest. Kelly, it's great to see you.
Yeah, Matt, great to see you too. I am super excited about today. This is also one of my favorite topics.
Awesome. And we like to, Kelly, do you want to introduce? I know Carin, but you know Carin so well. Why don't you introduce our guest a little bit today, and let's hear a bit from Carin before we kick off.
Absolutely. I couldn't be more excited to be introducing or having Carin on the show today. Just an absolute trailblazer in our industry for so many different reasons. And I think definitely honing in on the financial mastery side of things. She is the true guru, the master, the trailblazer, the one setting the scene and setting the bar so high on what, financial acumen really means in our space. And so, Carin, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks, Kelly and Matt. I'm so glad to be here. I really am. So thanks for having me. I think this is going to be a great session and hopefully a great use of any of the listeners' time. I think they're going to get some key nuggets today.
Awesome.
Just to introduce us, can you share a little bit about what got you to this point? I consider you a guru. I know Kelly shared just the presence, the way that you coach, the way you support, the way that you care about so many of us in the industry. Give the audience a little bit of background on your story.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think right now, after 5 decades in the business, and people ask about your career, I followed the growth. I think that's an easy way to say it. I started out in quick service, McDonald's, Wendy's, went to casual dining, Applebee's, Chili's, Red Robin, and then the fast casual segment, like McAllister's Deli. And I think starting out, and maybe that's why I'm so passionate about this topic today, is because I can look back at 5 decades and think about all the mistakes that I made, but all the things that I did to overcome it to ultimately get to a CEO role. And looking back at it, like many operators, people will look at us and say, "Gosh, she's such a great operator." She's really a great operator. But in that 5 or 6 words in that phrase, nobody's saying, I think she's a good leader. I think she's a good business person that's got potential in our company. So you never want to get into that position where they think you are just a great operator. And look, I love operations. I lead with that, but it's simply not enough.
And Carin, I think that that's such an interesting point. And so when you think about just your journey and where you shifted from sort of being in the operations side to really sort of understanding and leaning into the financial side of things, talk to us a little bit about like where did that transition happen, or when did you
Sure.
recognize this is when I want to lean into learning more about financials and taking ownership of it?
Yeah, I think I've done a lot of self reflection, thinking about could I have advanced sooner or whatever. And I look back at probably 4 or 5 key things that I probably should have done differently in my career. And the first one is simply to be an advocate for yourself, right? I don't think I ever spoke up earlier on in my career and said, I'd like to get to that next position. I always thought if I kept my head down, I got great results, someone was going to notice. It's simply not how the game is played, right? You have to be an advocate for yourself if you want to move up. And because of that, I watched 7 promotions go by that I felt like I was passed over. And I think when that finally happened, I can remember walking in and that eighth promotion, I'm thinking, hey, this one's going to be mine. And I walk in and my boss, Ron, was standing there and he said, hey, it's going to be a great day. And I said, oh, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is it. I am finally going to get that promotion. And he said, there's someone here that I want you to meet. You're going to train him once again. And when you're done, he's going to be your boss. And I thought, shoot, when's it going to be my turn? And he said, Carin, there's not a person in the company that thinks you want to move up. That's a turning point. That's something where you're like, wow, I need to speak up for myself and let people know that I have career aspirations. Now, think back, this is probably 4 decades ago. There weren't a lot of females in those higher level roles. And so I don't think they even thought about us. Even more important that we as women speak up for ourselves. But I also have to look back at the presentations that I did. Did I come across as a real professional? It'd be like someone would ask me about, we'd be in a steering committee about, for Wendy's, for example, and some of the challenges of ringing up an order to get the drive-through to go faster. And I would want to go through every detail of every keystroke of how to ring that up versus staying high level. Now I always tell people, speak in headlines. If they want the details, they'll ask, and most of the time they don't. But I think it's that executive presence and really putting myself out there as a financial person that kind of makes that difference. Kelly, if I just added one more thing, I think what happened was the company finally did this big ranking, and all of a sudden, where you sit there and you keep your head down and you hope you're noticed, all of a sudden I ranked number one in several different categories. And now on the other hand, the company was working on, hey, we want to do a better job at hiring. Let's figure out the success profile of those individuals who are doing well within our company. So they send someone out to interview me. And the person comes out, he's super kind. And at the end of it, he just says, look, Carin, I can see you're incredibly talented. And I know that I couldn't work, and he used the word magic that you do. But if I can help you in any way, if you cannot articulate how you're successful, this is the end of your career. This is it, And I'm like, holy cow. He goes, you got what it takes, but no one's ever going to see it. You never even lead with business results. He said, you have one of the number one P&Ls in the company, and you've never talked about it. And, he said, you just have to really think about how you come across. And I'm good at math and I'm good at numbers, but I was never really comfortable talking about the financials. Think about how we're raised. Did you talk about money in your family growing up? We certainly didn't. And then you think about in your home, usually one person, the husband or the wife or one partner, is the king or the queen of the checkbook, right? Wasn't me. I was working all the time. And so I just was never comfortable talking about money. But that all changed. And when I started to do that, the doors opened.
Yeah. It's such a, when you really look at the preparedness, right, of just understanding what you want, expressing what you want, being prepared and sharing your story, there's so much to take from that. And I have to acknowledge it, right? Carin did this at the start of her career, but we can also acknowledge that prepared even in this moment right now to add value to the audience. One thing I'd love to learn is you did embrace financial acumen or understanding. Was there a point in your career where you embraced the financials and it changed the dynamic in that relationship, whether it be with somebody interviewing you or in a steering committee meeting or looking at the next promotion? Like, when was a time or a story that you remember where you shared your financial leadership and it had an impact?
Yeah, I think it's similar to a restaurant manager when you've done inventory, and you just completed the work and you're like, whoo, got that administrative burden kind of taken care of. I'm going to hit submit, and then I go back to running my shift. Was it good? Was it bad? Do I know what I'm solving for? And so, when I first started out, it was just numbers on a page, check the box. I finished all my paperwork for the week, but I didn't do anything with it, right? And I think that's where that competitiveness starts to kick in. I wasn't athletic, but probably an overachiever and somewhat competitive. And then I started, learning a couple of different things. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term restaurant math before, but it's 60, 20, 20. 60% prime cost, food, paper, labor. 20% would be your occupancy costs, your supplies, your utilities, any other, expenses and things like that. And ultimately, if you're running a restaurant, you would love to have 20% left in profit. So you have money to invest in the business. You have enough working capital in case something goes wrong. The restaurant business is way too hard not to make money. I remember my first lesson from Dave Thomas with Wendy's. He said, profit is not a dirty word. And if you work for a company that doesn't care about profit, you're working for a company that doesn't care about their people. Wow. So it was really an interesting thing. But I think once I started grasping some of those concepts, my food cost was 38%. That's horrible, but I didn't know it. I had a lot of mistakes. Matt, we've talked about that, right? Making mistakes in the P&L. I didn't even know it was a mistake, and I think, once you learn that, and then all of a sudden you become more than just an operator. You become kind of the go-to person within your region because now you understand the financials. You're going to quickly find out that a lot of people don't.
And how, just for example, for the leaders out there, because this came up on some other episodes, we produce our beverage cost or our food cost for the week, and it's high or it's low. How do we go about asking the questions for clarity of what's the math? Like I owned a third-party inventory company for 18 years. We got paid to understand the numbers and coach a different result with some of the world's top operators. And it was really as simple as we just understood how to change the behavior. But how does a leader in your experience just go up and say, okay, my food cost is over. What do I do? How do they embrace that?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I would mention. Number one, think about when your area director comes in, if you're a restaurant manager, or you're going to see one of your bosses is coming into the restaurant. Kind of flip the way you think about them. Don't think, oh my God, my boss is coming in. You think about they're like a paid consultant. There is no cash registers at the headquarters. So you're paying for that individual. I used to think about my area director as a paid consultant. And when they came in, I would say, let me know what you want to accomplish today. But since you're here, this would be the best use of my time. I would like to learn about all of the details that show up under occupancy costs this week, or what are these bills that are hitting my P&L? I have no idea what they are. So use that time, use that individual as an expert, and to make sure that you're learning the skills. And they're going to think very highly of you when you start asking those questions. The second thing is you have to put the numbers in perspective. In other words, okay, if my food costs, we talked about prime costs, right? Let's say mine is 61.3% food, labor, and paper. Is that good? I don't know. Well, there's probably 10 other restaurants in my region. If I benchmark against those restaurants, I'm going to quickly know where I stand. And I'm going to want to be that number one position. So I think that's really one of the best things is just get some perspective from other P&Ls in the region.
And, I know personally, finances are always something that I've struggled with being able to talk about those numbers and building that confidence. When you think about leaders and managers today, coaching managers on how to build that confidence of being able to talk about it similar to you did, any, tips or tricks on how do you get into it to be able to start having those conversations, but having confident conversations, but ones where they have a deeper understanding of those financials and the terminology and being able to, how does a manager get better at that?
It's probably no different than using a foreign language. You just simply have to practice. You simply have to use the language. I think once I started learning some of the financial skills, and I would say, can I go meet with the CFO? Can I meet with the controller? Can I meet with the investor relations person? Number one, they were pretty excited that somebody from operations was interested in meeting with them. What I found out is they were equally uncomfortable with operations, right? It's like if we would throw out like GPLH, T versus A, all of our own acronyms are very foreign to them, in a lot of ways that we're so comfortable with. That you found out that, you had a common issue of trying to understand, whether it was EBITDA or ROI or, any of those financial terms. And they're all just simple math. So I really think, Kelly, just like you said, it's just having the confidence to say either, I understand, I understand so much about, about my P&L, but there's some things that I'm really not clear on. Would you be able to, coach me on a couple of these areas? And I think you just have to ask that. And who's going to say no? Right?
Sure.
I know. You can lay in bed at night thinking about, as a CEO, I'm so worried about, are we going to have enough cash to get through this next quarter? And no one else is thinking about it. You've got a problem. And so it's like, wow, sharing that vision. I'm always excited when someone comes to me asking how to do better with numbers.
And so when you're thinking about it for an emerging leader in the space, if you can make a recommendation on, the 3 numbers or the 3 metrics, right, that they should, know about, they should ask about, or you want them to be fluent in, any recommendations on what those top 3 should be?
Yeah, I guess I go 2 different ways. One, what I think, and then one, what's the right answer, right? It's so interesting. I've led a lot of talks, and I would just simply say, like, can anybody tell me what the system-wide sales are of your restaurant company? Yeah. Surprisingly, very few people can just even answer. In other words, if you're working for a company and you go to a reunion and you're thinking, oh, everybody's going to think I work for the restaurant industry, that's not cool. But if you say, I work for a $4 billion company that employs over 1,300 people, And we serve, middle America. All of a sudden, the way you think about your company really changes and shifts the mindset. But you should always know your revenue. Restaurant 101, food, labor, and paper every day, right? You can never go back and correct those the next day. So I think as I start out, I would talk about that. However, I think the right answer is this: whatever your bonus program is, because that's what the company is telling you what's important. Sure. I've never met a bonus program that I didn't like because I wanted to earn that money. And so those would be the numbers that honestly that I would pay most attention to. Whatever numbers were on my bonus plan is what I thought the company valued the most.
That's great.
And like I said, going back to the side of asking questions, because I think one thing that I've walked into groups is understanding exactly the impact that we have. Like you said, if we work for this $4 billion company, I'll share an example. I was working with a group this week. They have 800 locations, and we redefined the regional manager role from auditors to I change the lives of our franchisees. We support the lives and the financial success of our franchisees. And it shifted the mindset, but we had to get in a room to have that conversation. But from our side is how do we, where do we go and ask for the meeting? So who should we ask? If there's a leader out there, who should they ask for the meeting for? Because one thing you said there was the controller, which might be surprising to people, or the CEO or the regional. But who should people be going out to and asking for mentorship? Where do they get education inside their units or inside their brands or potentially outside their brands? Where can they go first?
Yeah, it's really a great question. And, you always start with your boss, right? And I think that's really good because, and I think one of the things that I've learned in my career, overall too, is, when you're looking at for a promotion, who's in the room when the decision is made, right? Think about that. Who's in the room? And then is anybody talking about me? Is my name even in consideration? And I remember I was working with Applebee's. I was the senior vice president of operations. So you think I'd have learned all these lessons by then, right? And I went to our chief people officer, Lou, and I said, I want to put in for the EVP COO role to lead both company and franchise operations. And I remember his comment was like, oh, that's interesting. Not the response you're looking for, right? Yep. And he made a comment. He said, Carin, how many people are in the room when the decision is going to be made? And I'm thinking, well, there's 7 men on the executive team. It's going to be 7 people. And how many of them are going to support you? Yeah. And I'm thinking, well, all of them. And then he goes, okay, that's interesting. How many in the last year, how many times have any of them come to you to seek your advice on anything that they're working on? And I was like, well, none. I'm in the field all the time, And then he goes, okay, how many times have you gone to them and asked them for any advice? And I said 0. And he said, let me ask you this. How many people are going to support you? I had to say 0. I had no network within my own company, right? And so I think that's one of the things that I learned very quickly is you got to, again, be an advocate yourself. You've got to have relationships with those financial people. And once you do, they're equally happy to talk with you about, operations and what they can do to help. So again, start with my boss. But I think when you go into it, you're really trying to get to the next level. You're not going from general manager to CEO. So another thing that I would simply say is in navigating your career is to go to your boss. Because look, we're going to have some great bosses and we're going to have some that are so uncomfortable giving feedback. So I've learned to take the career path dialogue on my own. Kelly, you're my boss. I say, hey, Kelly, I would really love to get to the next district manager position. I know that there's going to be a couple coming up over the next year. I've kind of looked at my overall performance. These are the things I think I'm really solid in. These are the 2 to 3 things that I think I need to get to the next level. Am I on track? Are these the things that I should be working on? And if not, let me know so I am focused on the right big thing. So my name has strong consideration when that next position comes up. So again, you may not be reaching out to the controller or the treasurer, but whoever handles the financials in your part of the region, get to know that person.
Kelly, just before you jump in, I want to leave. So one thing that really came from that question for me, and one thing we've seen interviewing these great guests on this podcast series, is success leaves clues. every high performing leader, and I would consider Carin one of the most influential people in hospitality I've ever had the opportunity to meet. And I say, Kelly knows, I say that from.
I second that.
Very kind. Thank you.
But I wanted the audience to recognize that she went out and took opportunity. She grew and dominated brands in a male dominated industry at the time and fought and got passed over and fought her way, but she put herself forward. Every leader who's come through on the podcast has not waited to be developed, not waited to be provided the next opportunity. And it's not just forcing your way through, but going with curiosity to people. And what she shared multiple times in the last couple of minutes, everybody that she approached or you might approach, as I've approached Carin and asked for help, and she's been happy to provide it. People are happy to give feedback when you show up looking to be educated, looking to hear their experience. So if there's a note-taking section for the leaders out there, no matter what position, because I'm taking the notes here now, it's just to define what you want and find those that can support your journey. Sorry to jump in there, Kelly.
No, I love it. I think it's, and I think we've heard that a couple of times too, right? The curiosity, wanting to learn more and wanting to kind of grow your career in that. And I think, Carin, for somebody that, you started in operations and you sort of almost forced yourself into the financial side. Did you always see yourself in the financial side of the business, or was that something that just kind of evolved over time? Were you always a finance person?
No, I really wasn't. But, I honestly, I was probably one of the smart kids in school, right? Math was easy for me. I was always in honors math and all that. But again, as we talked about, it's nothing that, you would ever talk about. And, but you have to. I mean, if you don't think it is table stakes to move up in a company, imagine being a CEO or a COO, even if you're in human resources, if you don't understand how the company makes money, right, and what they do with the money, you don't earn a seat at the table. You've got to be able to contribute either in a line position or a support position. Nobody gets a pass.
Yeah.
You look to, like, from my side, it's just looking at potential, blind spots as we look to move forward. One thing that I appreciate about Carin's leadership is I think you have a unique ability to see things in others that they don't see in themselves. Like, I think the first time I met you, I felt like you could almost see through me. Where you can, and with the most care and trust and respect, but I think it's this, and I don't like, I know maybe 3 to 5 people in my life that I've met that I can see that ability. If you were to share with the audience, just, it can be financial, but what are some of the blind spots that we might not be seeing as leaders that we just need to consider and spend some time on, whether it's financial related or development?
Yeah. It's an interesting way to ask that question. I think a couple of things that come to mind is, first of all, like a blind spot of like not getting comfortable with the financials. Number one, everyone's afraid to look dumb, right? Everyone is afraid. If I ask the question, I am absolutely positive everybody else in the room knows the answer but me, so I'm not going to ask. Right?
Yeah.
It's okay. You can say, even if you're going to be confident enough to say, I know we've had this conversation before about return on investment. Could you just review it one more time to make sure that I'm clear? Right? You can acknowledge that probably other people know it. It's okay. Don't be afraid to ask. You guys had a podcast already with Amy Hom and Kim Bollinger.
Yeah.
That was the biggest takeaway for me. Don't be afraid to ask questions. But a lot of it's the acronyms. Financial acronyms look really, hard. EBITDA, SLEBITA, right? RLOC, basis points. I was coaching someone the other day when they said, I dropped my food cost 6%. I go, 6% or 600 basis points? Yeah. They didn't know the difference, right? There is a difference on just understanding some of those, the restaurant terminology. Just simply ask.
And before one thing, I would love the audience to hear, I know we're here supporting LEAD, but in partnership with Gleam. Can you just share a little bit with the audience? There's the ability to get mentored inside of your organizations and go to your direct reports, but it's such an incredible opportunity for others to look for support outside the 4 walls potentially of the restaurant group they work with.
Yeah, definitely. Let me give you kind of the overall. Gleam is a nonprofit that all of us here on this call are part of. Yeah. We have 3 different programs. Number 1 is LEAD, where we're talking about right now, really working with entry-level emerging leaders that are going to be the future of the industry, making sure they get the development they need, whether it's through podcasts or live events. The second, for $75, you can get a mentor for 6 months to work on that one big thing that's important to you. Just go to gleamnetwork.net and sign up, and you can get a great mentor that can help you with financial skills or communication skills or anything that you want to learn. And then lastly, we have a program that's called CAP, Career Advancement Program. That is a 9-week boot camp to take hourly team members and get them the skills that they need to go into management. So lots of great development opportunities with Gleam.
Love it.
I think it's the Gleam side of things is, and I participated in the mentorship program. I had an amazing mentor, Monica. She was awesome. But I think it is just so critical when we look at the industry right now of, investing in our growth when potentially the environments we're in aren't providing those types of resources or leadership and lessons. And that's why I love the lead team, this podcast, and Gleam just for being able to provide those things. Carin, when you think about those emerging leaders and that mindset that they're in, what's a daily habit or a daily thing that they can be implementing to help sort of start setting themselves apart in their, in their departments or in their company to sort of be that person that understands the financials, that is going to be recognized and be top of mind for those promotions and career growth? What's one thing that somebody can be doing daily to sort of take advantage of that?
Kelly, I wish there was just one thing, but first of all, just think about every conversation that you have in the future with any senior leader. And I'm thinking, always try to put yourself in the mindset when they walk away, what are 3 things that I want them to think about me, right? And if you start to think about that, I might say, I want them to think I'm a great leader that can develop people and build high-performing teams, that I am results-oriented, and I have a pretty strong business and financial acumen. Once I say that to myself, if I don't talk about numbers, you can pretty much count out the last 2, right? So you have to start to say, how do I want people to perceive me? And I think that's a good frame and a good starting point. Always have the basic financial results at your fingertip. I always think if somebody walked into my restaurant, what do I want them to know? What am I most proud of our team? Hey, my annual revenue is $2.5 million. My comp sales this year, hey, I'm trending up. I'm up 2.3%. It's great to be in positive territory, knowing how tough the restaurant industry is today. Yeah. My operating profit, it's 17.4%. I'd like it to be 20, and I think I can make those improvements by working on better forecasts and better labor results. I think those type of things where someone knows I am on top of my business can make a huge difference.
Okay, last question as we're just up against time for this great episode, but we talked about leaders going and asking kind of up inside their organizations. A lot of the audience watching this are senior leaders, especially when it broadcasts on the LinkedIn channel. What would you say today, senior leaders, as they consider the development of their people? Like, is there a mindset shift as well for people in senior positions to really think and take care of the people that they're supporting, the next generation of leadership?
Yeah, I really think that, first of all, obviously I remember when I was promoted from a general manager to a district manager, right? And I think it was the first time I'm like, wow, I have all career-minded adults, not hourly team members. But I also realized that when I treated my hourly team members like they were career-minded adults, they got great results as well. Yeah. I think, again, we just have to be super comfortable making sure that we are teaching and making, financial conversations part of the everyday culture, part of the everyday fabric, and making sure that you're letting people know where the resources are. Don't be afraid to ask me questions about it, right? We heard Emily Williams-Knight talk about finding things on that Khan Academy, that is an online website that you can, find any decent, quick financial information in kind of microbursts. Read all the financial press releases about your company, or pick one company that's publicly traded that you go to on a regular basis. Learn everything about it. And then as each time say, I'll read a sentence. I don't know what this means. Dig in and learn it. And, again, it's not only knowing the numbers, but what you do about it. That's really important. But anybody can learn it. and you will see the same thing as I did. Doors will open when you become more of a financial expert.
I love it. What a powerful episode. Kelly and Carin, thank you so much for this conversation. And I hope that this is one that for myself, I can go through a few times and just really listen to the repeated messaging of asking curious questions, taking ownership of your track, and not only reading the numbers, but taking action on the numbers. Kelly, anything to close us out for today?
Gosh, I'd say just some amazing takeaways of easy things that I think as leaders in the space, we can not only be implementing and starting today to improve our financial, understanding, but also I think really amazing things, Carin, I think you shared about how we can be coaching our teams to want to learn more about finances and making it something that's part of every conversation. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your legacy, leadership, and learnings with us, because I think that this episode's going to be really impactful for so many leaders out there.
Thank you all.
Thank you to both of you, and thank you to the audience.
You're awesome. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.